This is chapter 5. The upper hand has bloody knuckles. I spent a lot of time trying to pinpoint the moment you split me in two. That might not be fair. To assign all the blame for my duplicity to you. But what's fair about any of this? I was myself, but you didn't want me. And if I couldn't be what you wanted by being who I was, then maybe I could become someone else. The breakup didn't bring me here. No, the breakup I understood. It killed me, but I could see why. I knew a road forward for us would hurt, but I believed that you had love left for me. I believed you when you said that we had a friendship worth saving. I believed in a chance down the road. A few months later, you dug your fingers down the sides of my ribcage and tore my heart in half. You did something that hurt worse than anything had before. You said 5 words that took everything I thought I knew about our relationship, every I love you, every babe, every mister, and cast a big old cloud of doubt over them. Hey. Cat stuff. You gutted our story to finish a sentence you'd been forced to abandon the day you chose me. 5 little words and you made me feel something I never thought possible. I'm going to see Jose. I hated you. I wasn't just angry. I fucking hated you and I wanted to kill myself. I wanted to do it and I wanted to leave a note that said, I hate you. This is your fault, and I hope every moment of happiness that you have is ruined with the memory of what a fucked up person you had to be to do something like this to me. I hope you're happy with him, and I hope he leaves you for someone easier to be with. I'm going to see Jose. The way you said it, matter of fact, with this placation in your tone that meant, listen, I know you're gonna freak out, but if you give me shit about this, I'll just walk away because we're not together and I'll do what I want. I'm going to see Jose. Because now, finally, after years of me standing in the way, you could cast me aside and the two of you could ride off into the sunset like you always wanted to, and now you're free to chase the guy you left me for the day before Valentine's Day. The guy you would have been with if only he lived here. But, except when he did live here, you weren't together. I forget why. I'm going to see Jose. I sat with the insecurity that your relationship with him created the entire time we were together. I had to give you a him or me ultimatum 3 times. I didn't have to. I could have done something else. I could have left, but I didn't. I still wanted you. I had to do it 3 times before you chose me, and even though you could objectively admit that he'd been disrespectful toward me and inappropriate with you in regards to our relationship, you still acted like you'd done me a fucking favor by cutting out communication with him. And now, 3 years had gone by since we'd even talked about him, and yet not a day passed without me wondering if he was still on your mind. I'm going to see Jose. I changed then. Some piece of kindness in me just broke. I could not reconcile who I'd known you to be with the person who just said those words. And since it has always been easier to extend grace and empathy to you than to myself, I didn't. I decided it was me, that I was the kind of person who deserved to be left, but still had. To move on from, but still live with. Used when the mood struck. Jettisoned when something better came along or came back. I deserve to hear the love of my life tell me that every time I looked at him while we were together and wondered if he was thinking about the one who got away, I was right. Of course you didn't say that. You didn't have to. Do you know how long we've been broken up? How long after you called off our engagement to tell me that you were gonna fly across the country to stay with him in the same bed for 4 days? 2 months. 60 days. When I tell you that you're capable of cruelty, of course, all that rage was just a defense. It wasn't rational. Of course, I wasn't actually wanting to die. I wasn't even all that angry. I was just heartbroken. I was finally entirely aware of how far away we were from each other emotionally. I'd been naive enough to assume that you'd ended things between us as soon as the scales tipped, but you'd made a lot more progress than that, and I don't think you'd assumed I had made similar headway. I just think you didn't care. You knew it would kill me. I'd go as far as to say as you knew the news carried potentially permanent consequences for us. Time has given me perspective and levity on a lot of the things that happened between us, a lot of what I blamed you for, and I've been able to let go of a lot of it. Most of it, really. Not keep it on your permanent record, so to speak. But this one, this wasn't just a decision, this felt like a map. It was the bolt of lightning that created a chasm between you and me that we have never managed to close. Objectively, is it the worst, most unforgivable thing to pursue an old flame 2 months after you've ended an engagement? No, I'm not pretending that, like, it's some heinous crime to open a door after walking out of another one. But let's pepper in some context. And as we go through each circumstance at play, maybe we'll decide where a reasonable person might have made a different choice. Jose said, like, bad things about me to you while we were together. Like, he had no respect for our relationship. And when you went to see him, it felt like you didn't either. You knew how insecure I was about him. At one time, I asked you if you found me as attractive as him, and you said, it's just different. We were together for 2 years at that point. You lied about him. Kind of a lot in the beginning. You picked him over me. I'm going to see Jose. Now, well, with the previously detailed factors in place, you could make the argument that who gives a shit? You broke up with me. My feelings as they pertain to your love life were by definition no longer your problem. You didn't need my approval. It maybe didn't make you the best guy in the world, but it's your life now. And and you'd be right. And if you explained it to someone else that way, they might see that too. But that isn't the whole story, is it? You keep things to yourself a lot. You parse out vague details here and there to close friends, but you hold so much of our story away from others. And I used to think you just valued your privacy, or you didn't want to burden someone with our problems, or it was about a matter of like airing dirty laundry or something. But the common thread to the secrets you keep is the almost inevitable accountability you would face if you told the whole truth. Like, so much of our lives together, so much of our life together, of the things you've said and done that have hurt me, I feel like they only seem justifiable to you because you refuse to evaluate them outside of yourself. Like, you can tune me out. You've been practicing that for years, and you can dismiss my opinions on your actions toward me by, saying, well, he's just an ex who can't get over it. Like, I'm not being reasonable or rational or something. But you couldn't do that with other people, and I think that's part of the reason why you don't tell them, why you don't talk to them about it. Why so much of this story, of our story, is news to so many people. I'm going to see Jose. After we broke up, we moved from a 1-bedroom to a 2. I hadn't bought a bed yet, though, so we decided I'd sleep on the couch until I did. But seeing as we were still having sex several times a week and neither of us had fully adjusted to sleeping alone, we just continued to share a bed. We had a few reasons for choosing to remain roommates. I've talked a lot about the impending wedding of 2 of our best friends being a big factor. We wanted to kind of force ourselves into a friendship. The fact that rent in the area was absolutely ridiculous, and me still not having a car certainly played into it as well. And you may have resented me for it, but I think you'd grown comfortable in the role of my caretaker. I wonder now if you weren't just worried about my ability to be independent. I wonder if some part of you kept hidden, maybe even from yourself, felt it had something to atone for. I wonder if you felt safe always having that card to play. How could I accuse you of not caring? How could I call you cruel? Look at the generosity you were still showing me even after we'd broken up. Would someone who didn't love me let me drive their car, sleep in their bed, lean on them through hard times financially? No. At the very least, we're even. I know how tacky this makes me sound. I know how ungrateful I must seem to you, questioning your motivations after already having accepted and relied upon your help, so let me be very clear. I don't believe for 1 second that you ever stopped loving me, or that your intentions here were entirely nefarious or untoward. This examination of behavior is just that. I don't take that lightly either, but I know this is the time to do it. I know this is the forum to address it in, and I know eventually you'll understand that, because I know the end, and neither of us will be ready if I don't. So we live together, same job, same home, same bed. By any objective metric, we are still sharing a life with one another, and we're okay with this for very different reasons. Now, a couple of short months of crushing depression and tidal waves of grief things start to feel less hopeless. I am beginning to feel like our future together could be a happy one day. I haven't given up hope entirely that we could potentially reunite as a couple, but I have distinct memories from this time of allowing myself to imagine how it would feel to see you involved with someone else. It hurt. A lot. Just the thought. But I've been so impressed with the consideration you'd extended to me. The all-in attitude you had about keeping me in your life that I was willing to try. I was willing to watch you find someone who would make you happy in the ways that I couldn't, because you made me feel like you'd always make my happiness a priority in all the ways you could. Then, good spirits abounding, a long-planned siblings trip to New York with my sister just days away, Things finally lit by the sun after what felt like years of a downpour. And I'm going to see Jose. There was no warning, no preamble, no collaborative communication about either of us feeling ready to move forward on the dating front. In an instant, the lifeboat I'd been desperately clutching to keep my head above water was gone, and there was nothing but the dark. I don't actually remember the rest of the conversation that we had that day. I remember exactly where I was. I remember every second leading up to it, and then I remember dark. I don't think we fought. I don't see how it would have been possible. I had to remind myself to breathe. I was nowhere near fighting shape. I told friends, I think I cried, but largely I packed it up because I knew immediately that I was incapable of actually dealing with it. My first thought after coming back to my body was to kill myself, and then explicitly detail why that was your fault. So I was more than like a day trip away from thinking about the matter rationally. I'm going to see Jose. That's all you said, but now, 7 years later, let me tell you what I heard. I am finally going to be with the person I always wished you were. I am single. I left you. I can do whatever I want. I can fuck whoever I want. I can get on Grindr or Tinder or Match. I can go on a million dates and nail down the qualities that I know I need to have a fulfilling romantic relationship. Or I can fly 3,000 miles to see the one person in the world you could potentially never forgive me for seeing. I could take all the memories of you sobbing and pleading with me to try to understand what my refusal to break away with him was doing to undermine our relationship and just shit all over them. I know this is going to kill you. Billy, I know this is something that you might not make it back from. I know what kind of hell you're going to be in every second of every day until I'm on the plane back home. I know. But that's not my problem. I'm going to see Jose. Fuck you. That moment brought such a physical sense of brutality that I went into kind of a flight or fight mode, except I froze instead. I felt a very clear sense of my options, and I thought back to our conversation about the ground rules for moving into our new place, and we had agreed no guys brought back to our shared space, and I couldn't get you, like I couldn't fault you for anything there because no, you were going there, obviously. We agreed to tell each other if we were planning like a date or if we were going to be physical with somebody, and you were giving me a month's heads up, so it's like, all right, well, technically I guess we're not checking off that box too. We never made anyone specifically off limits. I never explicitly said, not him, please God, anyone but him, just not him. So what do I do? How do I beg the man I still love, who does not love me, to love me enough not to break my heart again? How do I forget the disgust on your face when I literally begged you to give therapy a chance before deciding to be done with us? I can't. So I can't beg, it won't work. If I cry, you'll just roll your eyes and explain how you just knew I'd find a way to ruin this for you. And then all at once, I knew the end. You won. But it was gonna cost you. From the quick math above, I reduced my logic to one crystal clear truth. For 7 years, I have known exactly how you and I would finish our story from that moment to this one. It has only ever been a matter of when. This is not the part where I tell you the end, but it is rapidly heading toward us. Knowing it and accepting it were two different worlds, and I deeply regret not taking care of that trauma that experience created in me at the time. After your announcement, I put myself on a course that would eventually hurt a lot of people, though none more than myself. It was almost like I saw my fate as an absolute, and if you stubbornly refused to drown with me, I was determined to at least pull you under a few times. I should have believed I could save myself, and though I ultimately believe that the times that we have had together since that day are filled with enough good to outweigh any regret, when you said, I'm going to see Jose, what I should have done is squared up my shoulders, looked you dead in the eye, and with a firm and clear voice said, I won't be here when you get back, and I don't ever want to see you again. You knew I couldn't, you knew I wouldn't, but had I really decided to show up for myself that day, had I understood that no one who knew my worth would ask me to endure that kind of humiliating, shameful, utter fucking decimation of my pride, I would have said it. Instead, I was supportive. I tried to be cool. I had sex in New York, a story that I tell for its romantic idiosyncrasies in movie like Meet Cute that in reality was just a juvenile attempt to beat you to the punch. I wasn't ready, not even close. So I did something for the very first time. I detached during sex and I played a part in bed. I became what he wanted so that I could protect the only part of me you still treated like it belonged to you. My body. When the time finally came for you to go, I wished with every fiber of my being that I had a little more of that sustained mid-level panic attack I'd been in since you told me you were going. That window of purgatory would become a template of sorts, actually. Maybe never on the same grand scale, but from then on, every time you had a date, I would fall down the same nightmare rabbit hole. I'd politely milk you for details about whatever guy you were going out with, and then spend the rest of the time before your date obsessively tracking his and your social media presence for overlap. I would learn everything I possibly could about him and desperately work through as many realistic outcomes of your date as possible based on what I'd discovered. I'm not proud of this behavior. I mean, I'm objectively impressed with like the fine-tuned system that I eventually created and its efficacy. I mean, I got to a point where I pretty much knew exactly how things would go, and more often than not, I was right. I was sick. I was in a prison in my own head, but I mean, at least I wasn't in a sick mental jail and wrong. Can you imagine? I drove you to the airport, a detail that still haunts me. And as you disappeared into the wave of JanSports and Patagonia duffels, I thought, fuck, he's really doing it. All the daydreams I'd had leading up to this moment of you having a last-minute change of heart evaporated as you took off. Later that night, I got blackout drunk and had sex with someone I couldn't even tolerate sober in the backseat of a pickup that belonged to neither of us in a Sherry's parking lot. I was willing to become someone I hated just to stop being someone I felt so fucking sorry for. I cried every minute I wasn't drunk or working. In some minutes, I did both while you were gone. I'd say while sleeping too, but I did none of that. I paced and I panicked, but by some miracle, I did not call you. I texted you at one point to say that I hoped you were having a good time. I hate myself for that. Just to be sure you remembered that I was still what you'd be coming home to. You text me back to say that you miss me, and I still don't know if it was mercy or selfishness, but I didn't care then and I don't care now because it was the first time in 48 hours I felt like I could breathe. You say it's been really uncomfortable and you make a plan to call me the next day and fill me in with the details, and I'm embarrassed to admit this, but that night I felt nothing but unbridled joy. It wasn't serendipity. You weren't two ships finally docking at the same point. It wasn't romantic. It was flying for a day to realize you were strangers. And immediately knowing that whatever you'd gone there looking for wasn't something he would give you. It's crazy, but right now, reading this is the first time I've ever really considered how hard that must have been for you. I'm sure I said it then, but of course I didn't mean it at the time. But now, today, the thought of a boy treating you poorly, not liking you the way you wished he had. I'm sorry. I really am. When you called the next day, you told me that it just wasn't there, that the attraction to him diminished, and you knew it almost immediately. He made a few moves to be physical with you, but you declined every time. You told me you missed me with an intimacy in your tone, and after our emotional reunion, when I came home from New York, I was elated to pick you up the next day from the airport. I fell into what would become one of your most devastating traps. I expected the momentary emotional vulnerability you showed me on the phone to carry over to seeing me the next day, but I'd learned soon enough that hearing me say I missed you back at double the audible enthusiasm was all you really needed to course correct, because you were pined for, you were missed. No need to get down about this one guy. You have a chubby placeholder warming your bed, dying to be of use for as long as it might take you to find Mr. Right. When you got in the car, you saw my face light up and ignored it. You spoke in clipped and annoyed sentences about how bad the trip had been. I became the second man in a week who you wished were better after traversing the continent. Your decisions here, hurtful as they were and still are, cannot take the credit for what followed. This car crash of an experience was just the training wheels for the next 7 years of me fighting like hell to escape what was ultimately inevitable. I wonder now if I'm as sex positive as I say I am, or if I spent years trying to show you how desirable I was. I wonder if I was really happy being single or just used to feeling alone. Neither of us is capable of knowing the what ifs, I guess. I don't know if I'd be better, but without those 5 words, I know everything would be different.